Here's why I'm still excited when it comes to Polkadot in 2025, even though nothing I say is financial advice. First of all, the idea of maybe $50 when it comes to DOT, which is Polkadot's native token, that hasn't left my mind, even though only time will tell. But sometimes people may be wondering, okay, what is the timeline? And I think this is why I'm still ultimately kind of very excited still in 2025. And let me explain why. If we take a look at, for instance, historically speaking, altcoins usually as a worst case scenario, they peak around 18 months after a Bitcoin halving event. So if we consider how the last Bitcoin halving event happened in April of last year, and we add 18 months on top of that, that's actually October this year. Now, is that a guarantee? No, but in my opinion, even though that each cycle may be different, to me, I'm still kind of looking forward to 2025 because if, let's say, DOT ever does decide to go to the price of $50 or even just like 30 or 40 or whatever like that, in my opinion, it doesn't seem like maybe even as a worst case or something like that. Some people may be wondering, oh, like December of this year. It doesn't seem like that is a timeline that is too, I think, kind of compact, right? I don't think it's too like short of a time frame because even if we take a look at something like Bitcoin, which is the largest project out there that we have in this space, take a look at how fast that moved, right? It's not like it takes like a super long time. Maybe it has a waiting time that is quite a while that people are holding since the beginning, but when it really does decide to wake up, sometimes the timeline doesn't feel like it takes that long. Like even take a look at Bitcoin or something like that. So again, I'm not talking about gold or like the S&P 500 where sometimes things kind of take a while, but of course this is again granted depending that if we do ever see a fully fledged type of hypothetical altcoin season. But I think if we do ever see one, I would not be surprised if it did look better than back in 2021 because even though the 2021 bull run was highly, regarded as being something amazing, we have to take a look at during the peak of that bull run, there was around 300 million crypto owners. Currently, we have over 600 million. And again, that's pretty much double. And I don't think we've even seen a fully fledged type of altcoin season yet during this cycle. Not to mention, we have that many crypto owners right now. It's not like a projection where we have to wait, maybe 6 months or a year down the line. Again, we have that allegedly right now. So imagine what would the amount of crypto owners be like if Ethereum was at 10 grand, maybe, right? If Bitcoin was at 250 grand or like 300 or something like that. If it was more, it would not surprise me, again, in terms of crypto owners. So to me, I'm still very excited if we ever do see a fully fledged type of altcoin season because just from the sheer amount of crypto owners, I think, man, I wouldn't be surprised if it did look better than back in 2021. Now, some people may be arguing, okay, like there's more projects currently than before. Take a look at the competition. Well, we have to think about this. Even though that is true in the grand scheme of things, many projects that I see are random meme coins that people launch using these launch pads because nowadays people just keep launching, these meme coins, right? Using these launch pads. But I don't think they're a direct competitor in a sense when it comes to Polkadot. Let me explain why. Polkadot is focused on interoperability. It's focused on connecting blockchains together. Before I get into what this really means, we have to consider when it comes to projects that are focused on interoperability, Polkadot is arguably still the most famous one, I think, even right now. If we take a look at a number two, I would say maybe arguably it's something called Axelar, but the difference between Axelar and Polkadot is still very massive, you know what I mean? So Polkadot, I think, still has that clear number one space, or should I say number one position, for projects that are focused on that interoperability space. So we got to think about this. Yes, there's more projects to kind of compete with Polkadot in the grand scheme of things, but for the market sector that Polkadot is focused on, Polkadot is arguably still the most popular one for what it is, again, focused on, which is interoperability. So if there's 10, 20, or 30 more players now that are very reputable or very I would say popular when it comes to the ones that are focused on interoperability, then probably that's a different case. But again, I still see Polkadot as being the most popular one within this space. So to me, I'm still very excited. However, only time will tell. Now, what is the purpose of Polkadot? Again, interoperability and connecting blockchains together. Let me explain, because there's many blockchains out there, many networks, but because by nature, a lot of them are independent of one another, they don't have this ability to freely send data and value to each other, in which case, if that is the case, that means that they lack interoperability. Now, I don't think that is such a good situation to necessarily have because, for instance, if we use like a real life example for whatever reason, let's say in a make-believe scenario, I'm just making this up for this example. Let's say I'm using like AT&T and then I can't call my friend who's using T-Mobile just simply because I'm using a different carrier. Now that wouldn't really make much sense, right? It would be like kind of a hindrance actually. But then of course that problem doesn't exist. But then I'm just saying, imagine if that was maybe the case, you know? So this is why I think Polkadot does serve actually a pretty good purpose. And let me just use a very famous example. Take a look at Bitcoin and Ethereum. They're very massive, right? However, because they're independent of one another, they cannot really send data and value to each other. Now, what steps in? Something like Polkadot. So this is why I'm a big fan. Now, not to mention, Polkadot has something called Kusama. Kusama, by the way, is a canary network to Polkadot. And basically, let me explain this like in a kind of simple way. Like if we take a look at projects that typically want to launch on Polkadot, they're usually going to start off with Kusama first to kind of test out the project under real economic conditions before maybe later on moving to Polkadot. The reason why I say maybe is because it is not necessarily like a requirement for it to move on later to Polkadot. Like for instance, we take a look at Moonriver, which is on Kusama, and I'm very bullish on Moonriver, by the way. So feel free to check out those videos if you want to. But again, I'm just going to mention that real quick. But even besides that, if we take a look at something like, again, Kusama, it's kind of like a testing ground, really, the way I view it for something like Polkadot. The reason why usually some developers start off there before moving on later to Polkadot is because it's typically cheaper to rent building space on Kusama when compared to Polkadot, and it's typically easier to make changes on. So again, a new developer maybe, or like, a group of developers who may not necessarily want to just go so heavy into Polkadot, they may start off with Kusama first. So that's kind of the vibe when it comes to Polkadot. I still do like it. I'm a big fan. And if we take a look at the idea of maybe $50, considering current circulating supply market cap at that point would be around $80 billion, it's nearly an 11x from here, which I don't find like, the worst hypothetical upside. It's not necessarily the best either, and how can it? It's around 11x from here, but it's not necessarily the worst either. I mean, a Bitcoin or Ethereum, let's say, did like a 3x from here, people would already be like, oh wow. Like for instance, if we take a look at Bitcoin and go into 300 grand, that's less than a 3x from here. If we take a look at Ethereum, go to 10 grand, that's less than a 3x from here as well. So I don't find like maybe the idea of an 11x too bad. This is just my mentality. And around an $80 billion market cap, I mean, we've seen like Dogecoin reach over 80 billion back in 2021. So it's not something that necessarily would kind of be surprising to me, but only time will tell. I'm just still staying patient and I'm still excited for 2025. However, this is just my mindset. And again, only time will tell, but I'm still a big fan when it comes to Polkadot. And feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I greatly appreciate it. It's been Lee the Captain, and I'll catch y'all on the next one. I'm out. Peace. Bye.